Hi everyone, welcome to Stitch Delight, and today we will teach you how to make these in the hoop zipper bags. They are completed in one single hooping and these bags are fully lined inside. The back is plain fabric and also the cutest little key fobs. You will need a cutaway stabilizer big enough for your hoop, and then your fabric pieces, which will be detailed in the instructions when you download. I'm using 100% cotton and some batting, striped fabric, a plain piece of fabric in any color of your choice, a small square of 5 inches, then your lining fabric. I'm using these elephants for the lining that's inside my bag, and I'm using the blocks fabric then for the outside mainly. Let's get started. You will need a zipper long enough for your bag, and I'm using some ribbon as a pull tab on the edge, and I just use some rope with a D-ring for my little tabby on the left where my fob will attach. In your first step you will stitch the outline. There's two steps, one is the big one and then the smaller square. Spray your white piece of fabric lightly with 505 spray and then place it over the square that's stitched. You can now continue to stitch the next step. This step is just to tack down your fabric. You can now trim the left and the top side. Close to the stitches, don't need to be too close. You can leave a little gap if you wish. The other fabric will cover it in later steps. You can now continue to stitch the elephant. You can also substitute this with any other picture you have. So if you don't want the Ellie, then simply load another design and add whatever you want onto that square. The next step that we'll stitch is just a placement stitch for the next piece of fabric. I'm using my striped fabric in this case. I'm just ironing my fabric flat first. This is just totally optional. I just feel that it gives a much neater finish. So take your small piece of fabric and line it up with the left edge of the square that's stitched, and then stitch the tack down step. Fold your fabric over to the left side, and again I find it useful to just press it quickly. Stitch the next step, and this will tack down the fabric. Now again trim the extra fabric on the left side. The top and bottom you can leave. At the same time we will place our next piece of fabric, again lining it up with the left edge, and stitch the next step. This tacks down the fabric firmly in place. Again fold over your fabric to the left and press. And continue to stitch the next step. trim the extra fabric on the left side as we did previously. And then place your third piece of fabric, lining it up again with the edge on the left. Stitch the next step to tuck that down in place. This piece again gets folded over to the left and I'm pressing it down. And on to the next step, which will tack it down. Again, trim the extra fabric on the left. So these first few steps are all exactly the same. The next step is a square that will stitch on your left hand side. And that will be our placement for our batting. I'm using a thin quilter's batting. I do not recommend using a thick batting as you will have difficulty turning your bag inside out later on. The batting of course is optional. If you do not like it, then by all means you don't need to put it in, but it really makes the quilting that follows pop beautifully. The next step will tack down your batting in place, and you will notice that it stitches a little bit smaller than the previous step. That is so that we don't have any batting in the seam allowance. So carefully trim your extra batting around the whole square right next to the stitches. Stitch the next step, which will show you where to place the next piece of fabric. We're now using our larger piece of fabric, the plain fabric, and be lining it up with the edge that just stitched. Stitch the next step to tuck down that fabric in place. I'm using a little 505 spray over the batting area just to keep my fabric in place because my fabric I'm using is quite soft. And then you can continue to stitch the quilting. The next step that will stitch is a line up top. That is just to finish off the top section. And also will give us a placement for the top piece of fabric. After this step you can continue to trim away the extra fabric on the top. You will now use your piece of fabric that goes below the zipper and line it up with that edge and stitch the next step to tack down the fabric in place. Fold the fabric upwards, and I like to give it a good press. You can finger press as well. Stitch the next step to tack down that piece of fabric right where the fold is. We will now fold this piece of fabric down again and tape it in place, as we need it out of the zipper area for the moment. So let's continue with the next step, which will be your zipper placement. You will notice 3 lines that will stitch. So no matter if you use a number 3 or number 5 zipper, you will line up the center of the zipper with the center line. Do make sure your zipper is long enough, so there's about 1 inch on either side extra. I'm using a 2-sided tape to help me with placement of my zipper and to keep it firmly in place. You can use zipper tape as well, which you iron on. I only happen to have 2-sided tape at hand. So I'm putting a strip at the top of the zipper and a strip at the bottom of the zipper, and removing the paper to reveal the sticky side. Quite a mission to get this paper off. When done, I can place my zipper, and remember to line up the back of the teeth with the center line. And you can now continue to stitch the next step, which will tack down your zipper in place. After this is done, I've taken my top piece of fabric and folded it over about just over 1 inch and ironed it nice and flat, and this just helps me give it a nice straight edge next to the zipper. So I'm placing that with the fold down right next to the teeth and line it up where I want it, and then I'm unfolding it, and that will give me that super nice edge so I can manipulate exactly where my fabric lays. I'm now going to turn the hoop wrong side facing me, and I'm going to cut out the stabilizer between those 2 tack down steps which tack down the zipper. Doing it at this point removes all the stabilizer, so you don't need to try and get it out of the seam later on after the fabric is attached. This is the 6 by 10 inch hoop bag, just for some additional information. After this is done, we're going to take our piece of lining fabric and we're going to line it up with the top of the zipper. You will see there's a stitch line just above the zipper there, so I'm just lining it up with that line, and I'm taping it in place. Make sure it doesn't move when you place it back in your machine. So tape it down firmly. You can even use pins, but do the pins from the top so the head of the pin doesn't come in the way. Back into the sewing machine, or in your embroidery machine rather, and you can stitch that tack down step now. I like to secure this properly, so you'll see it will stitch a few times left to right. When done, you can remove all the sticky tape, use a little bit of 505 spray and then fold over that piece to the top. You can press it with the iron if you like, just do not press over the zipper at this point. You will do the same on the back of the hoop. On the back I really like to give it a nice press, it gives a nice crisp finish. And then back into the machine, and we can stitch that step above the zipper next to the fold to neatly finish off the top section. You will also see it will do a run stitch along the top edge of the bag as well after that step. You can trim away the extra fabric at the top, front and back now if you like. We will now do the bottom, and I'm placing my lining the way I like it. Almost did it wrong way around, and I'm lining it up with the bottom of the zipper. You can scooch it down a little bit if you want a bigger seam allowance there, and I'm just taping it in place. We're only working on the back of the hoop for now, so your front fabric is still folded down. And we will stitch the next step, which will tack down your lining fabric at the back to the zipper area. We will now work on the front after we pull down the lining fabric at the back. So bring your fabric down, and again I like to give it a little bit of a press to make sure it's nice and flat. And I'm just going to tape it down for now. Flip the hoop right side facing you. And the front piece of fabric, you can remove all the tape now. And I like to trim this down to about 1 1/4 inch from the stitch line. You can draw a line if you have another type of fabric. I've got these blocks to make sure that I'm stitching straight, or cutting straight rather, but by all means draw a line and then just cut along that line. You can see it's just over an inch, inch and a half. So just make sure, I will even trim it a little bit shorter maybe. Let's just see how it folds inward now. So you're going to fold the double onto itself and then line it up with the zipper and see how it does. If it's still too long, just cut it a little bit shorter. And when you're happy, take some sticky tape to hold it in place. This will hide all the back stitches we've done in the previous steps. Stitch the next step, which will tuck down this fold in place. Remove all the sticky tape. I am using a clear Scotch tape, but you can use painter's tape as well. Any low-tech tape will do the trick. It's now time to pull our zipper to the center. This is very, very important. If you do not do this at this stage, you won't be able to turn your bag inside out. We'll also add our hardware. I'm just using 2 pieces of soft rope with a D-ring attached for my pull on the left hand side. And your D-ring you'd want to place to inward towards where the zipper opening is, and tape it down. I'm also using just a piece of ribbon folded in half for the pull tab on the right hand side. Again, secure with some tape. Any other hardware you want to add, you can do so at this point. We will now add our back fabric to cover the whole area. You can tape this down, but I'm just holding it as it goes. So just stitch the next step, then it will be a stitch all around your bag. Almost done, only one step to go. Remove your hoop from the machine and turn it wrong way facing you. And we're then ready to add the lining fabric. Add your lining fabric over the whole bag, and I'm taping it in place. And continue to stitch your final step. You will notice it leaves an opening at the bottom, which we will use to turn it inside out. all done with the embroidery. You can remove it from the hoop now. And let's move over to the table to start cutting it out. Where the opening is, just leave a little tab there at the bottom. The rest you can trim around about 1/4 of an inch away from the closest stitches. I'm just cutting this a little bit shorter, but leaving about 1 inch. The rest I'm cutting about 1/4 of an inch from the stitches. If you look at where the opening is, that is your lining part, so I'm keeping those 2 pieces of fabric, the rest I'm cutting off. This is to avoid having bulk in that seam allowance there. You can trim that as close to the stitches as possible. There you can see the opening, which we'll use to turn it inside out. But I'm first going to clip my corners to make it turn smoothly. I think I forgot to clip this one. Let me do it quickly. Then I'm trying to open the seam while I press it inwards. It just makes it turn easier. And you will turn the whole back through this opening. You can reach inside from the bottom to open your corners neatly, making sure they're all pushed out fully. And then I like to use my iron at this point just to give it a good press and make sure the seams are nice and flat. I really found that ironing in between steps gives a lot better results. The bottom opening, we will fold those flaps inwards now. And then you can either machine or hand stitch the opening closed. So sew up your bottom of your bag where the opening is, either by hand stitch or machine stitching. To speed things up, I'm just going to turn it inside out and I'll stitch it closed later on. So through the zipper opening you can again turn your bag inside out. You will see it turns much easier now, especially after you gave it a press previously. Go and push out all the corners and the seams and give it another good press. I like to press inside to make sure my lining is nice and flat at the back, and then all the side seams and corners. if you press over the zipper, just do it quickly so you don't melt the teeth. And it's all done, folks. Congratulations, you made a little bag in about 40 to 50 minutes. And as you can see, it's fully lined inside. You see no raw seams at all. Attach your little key fob. And this makes the perfect gift for a baby shower, for a baby diaper bag, to add your wet wipes in. But remember, like I said previously, you can add your own design if you want to change the theme. I hope you had fun. Thank you so much for joining us for this tutorial. Remember to subscribe and hit the little bell to be notified when we add new videos. Thanks for watching.